you ever picked up a hitchhiker? This is a story that will make you think twice. It was a cold, foggy night. Sarah was driving home from a late shift at work, the road ahead barely visible under the dim glow of her headlights. She lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone, but tonight the streets were deserted. The eerie silence pressed against her car, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As Sarah rounded a bend, she spotted a figure on the side of the road, a man wearing a long dark coat, his head bowed low against the chill. He raised a thumb, signaling for a ride. Normally, Sarah wouldn't stop. It was too risky, even in a quiet town like hers. But something about the man's hunched posture and the desolation of the night tugged at her conscience. She slowed to a stop and rolled down the window slightly. "Where are you headed?" she asked. The man's voice was low and raspy. "Just to the next town over, please! It's freezing out here!" Against her better judgment, Sarah unlocked the passenger door. The man climbed in, his coat dripping with dew from the fog. He smelled faintly of earth, like damp soil after rain. Sarah tried to make small talk, but the man only responded with short, clipped answers, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. The drive was tense. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. He was staring straight ahead, hands resting on his knees. His nails were dark, almost black, as if stained by something. They reached the outskirts of the next town, and Sarah felt a wave of relief. She pulled into a gas station to let him out. "Here you go," she said, forcing a smile. The man turned to her slowly. His eyes glinted in the dim light, and for the first time, Sarah saw his face clearly. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his lips curled into a chilling smile. "Thank you for the ride," he said. "You should be careful picking up strangers. Not everyone is safe." Before she could respond, he opened the door and stepped out. But when Sarah looked in her rearview mirror, he wasn't there. He hadn't walked away. He hadn't disappeared into the fog. He was just gone. Terrified, Sarah sped home and locked every door and window. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she decided to tell a friend about the strange encounter. When she mentioned the location where she'd picked him up, her friend's face went pale. "That stretch of road?" her friend said. "That's where they found a man's body last year. He'd been hit by a car. They say his spirit still roams there, looking for a ride." Sarah's blood ran cold. She never drove that road at night again, and she never picked up another hitchhiker. But the story doesn't end there. A week later, Sarah's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated but answered it. On the other end, a raspy voice whispered, "Thank you for the ride." Then the call dropped. Her heart raced as she stared at her phone. She called her friend, trying to calm down, but as they spoke, Sarah's voice faltered. From the other end of the line, she could hear faint breathing, raspy and slow, as if someone was listening in. Sarah hung up and turned to look out her window, and there, in the foggy glow of her porch light, stood the man in the dark coat, smiling that same chilling smile. Frozen in terror, she scrambled for her phone to call the police, but as she glanced back out the window, the man was gone. She locked herself in her bedroom, clutching the phone tightly, unable to sleep. The next morning, Sarah found a note slipped under her front door. The paper was old and yellowed, the ink smudged. It read, "You gave me a ride. I'll be seeing you again. Soon." That night, as she lay in bed, she heard the faint sound of footsteps echoing in her hallway. She grabbed her phone, dialing the police with trembling hands. Just as the dispatcher answered, her bedroom door creaked open. Standing in the doorway was the man, his eyes glinting in the dark. The phone slipped from her hands as the last thing she heard was his raspy whisper, "I told you, not everyone is safe."